we don't turn this successful program around to into a program to enhance green technology and all this stuff. And it's working well now. Let's don't mess around with it. Let me ask you, first of all, Mr. Sheff, you would be the one, I think, who would be responding to one of the concerns that I mentioned in my opening statement. That is, Oklahoma has a lot of the small rural communities. And have you, I had to leave during part of yours, but I did read your written statement. Do you have any comments on how we could enhance this program in terms of using a greater amount of it for the smaller rural communities?
Senator, yes, I do have some thoughts on that. For one thing, I need to point out that for every EPA competitive grant that's awarded to a small community, it does seem to skew more towards metropolitan areas, but these rural communities don't have staff grant writers, they don't have grant managers, they don't have experts in brownfield law or guidance. They have to come up to speed very rapidly on all the different federal requirements that are tagged onto these grants: procurement, Endangered Species Act, National Historic Preservation Act compliance, a myriad of things that these folks have A, never heard about before, and B, don't even know where to go to get assistance. They immediately go to the state, which is great. That's part of our role, is to assist these folks. But for us, it makes a lot more sense when we have the content and the field experts at the state level through our state assistance grant program. We can crank these things out and really get into the communities, do outreach, help them figure out the scope and nature of their programs and projects, and go in and quickly and efficiently remove the environmental barriers to their project.
No, can you not do that now?
We can, Senator, but the problem is that year to year, additional states, additional tribes, additional territories are asking for funding from the same pot that we get our funding from now. That funding source doesn't go up or down, it stays the same. So as more people come in, our funding is reduced. To further complicate that, the amount of site-specific assessment work that we are able to do currently through our grant is limited to 50% of the grant itself. So as that expenditure shrinks, the amount of money that we can spend on the ground in these small communities shrinks as well.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, I have nothing against professional grant writers, but I'm saying when you go into one of my small communities in Oklahoma and they talk about how do you do this and how do you put this together, yes, they do have access to the state. We're going to be working with them to try to get more help for them. But they'll say, we're paying, and to them it's an astronomical amount of money you pay to someone to do this, and frankly they don't have it. And so what I'd like to have you do, for the record, is to write down some recommendations that you could make in this program that would allow easier access to the small communities. Why don't you do that just for the record for us? Okay? And the rest of my time, I'd like to, Mayor Cornett, I just wish, Mr. Chairman, that you could come to Oklahoma, stay in the Skirvin Hotel. Now, New Jersey's not like Oklahoma. Something in Oklahoma that's 100 years old is ancient. Yeah. In New Jersey, it's new. And so it's totally... Notice that he glances at me. But the Skirvin Hotel, I can remember when I was in the state legislature, that was many years ago, and it was a palace, and of course it deteriorated over this period of time. And they did a masterful job of putting it together, back together the way it was originally. We're doing the same thing in Tulsa at the Mayo Hotel. And it's just really just when you see the things that they've done in Oklahoma City, and that's what I only wish that during your presentation we had had some big pictures to hold up, because that would better show a before and after contrast of what we have. Now, I guess I'd like to ask you that is there anything that we would be able to do when I pointed out the problem of the pre-2002 problem that we have? Is there anything in your city, in Oklahoma City, that you would be able to do that you would not be able to do with that restriction that's there?
Yeah, we do have a number of sites that were acquired prior to the 2002 legislation. I can think of one site specifically at Northeast 4th and Lottie, which would be in an underperforming section of our city that would fall into the category of a site that would need some assessing. at the environmental issues, and it's probably ripe for redevelopment if we had this type of enabling legislation to allow us to go in and work on it.
Okay, that's good. And I think, Mr. Chairman, we ought to really look seriously at that and see what obstacles are there to keep us from doing that and maybe correct it. And I think the director who is on the first panel would probably agree with that. And lastly, in the time that I have, Mick, if you could kind of, when you look at Del City, Bricktown, the Canal, the Skirvin Hotel, all these projects that you talked about that were so successful, what have you put an employment figure down that would cover these as to how employment has been enhanced as a result of that? I have to say that we're fortunate in Oklahoma. Our unemployment rate is 5.5%. So we have, we're very fortunate with that and understand that. But how has this enhanced our employment situation?
Well, I don't have a number for you, and I've asked my staff to try and answer that question specifically. I can tell you that we have the lowest unemployment in the United States among large metros with 5% flat.
Well, why don't you do that instead, for the record, in writing, so I can use that up here in trying to help sell this very successful program.
We'll be glad to, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.